So recently, it was kind of stated, a lot of people are like, "Oh, Sony will have to do what Microsoft does in the future. They'll have to do this, they'll have to do that." And at the end of the day, I've always kind of stood fast that it doesn't make sense for Sony to do what Microsoft does. First of all, Sony is very strategic when they put things on PC. If you're doing something multiplayer wise, then yeah, you can see a little bit of a interest in putting that on PC. But their single player experiences, the God of Wars, The Last of Us, and stuff like that, I think, they're going to continue to just do those on console, taking advantage of the console, and, maybe later down the line somewhere, a few years later, they'll put them on PC or whatever to get a few extra bucks. But they don't even really need to do that, in my opinion, to be successful. And they certainly aren't going to put any games on Xbox. That's why I say Xbox's strategy is really, really dumb. And I understand the short-term strategy of them making money by doing that, but the long-term is going to be a disaster for them, especially when Sony starts putting out a lot of games, because there can be a such thing as too many games, right? If like you go through Netflix or whatever, there's so much stuff on there. A lot of people just spend more time scrolling than anything. I think you just are going to start really seeing Xbox release games on PlayStation, and they're going to get lost in a void. You know what I mean? Because there's just too much stuff there, and that sounds silly, but it's just the God's honest truth. I mean, do you watch everything that's on TV? Do you watch every movie that comes out? It's like, no, you don't. Or can you play every game that's released? Nope. So this is going to be an interesting video. What's up, everybody? I'm Crab Gamer. This is Crab Gamer Reviews, back with another video. Thank you so much for checking it out. I certainly appreciate it. Please like, share, subscribe. I do daily gaming content, try to be fun yet informative. And the only thing I ask is if you guys do watch the content, please like it, as it helps the content to be seen, and I certainly appreciate it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, because like I said, this is going to be a interesting video, and this is one of the videos where I kind of like to get people's takes on it. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder what people are going to say, what people are going to think, because you guys might think differently than me, and I think that's okay. At the end of the day, you can either think look for yourself, or maybe I make some good points and you go, oh, you know what, he's making some good points there. That's a very good thing at the end of the day. And hopefully you guys understand where I'm coming from this stuff. It's not a place of hate. It's just like Microsoft, I think, really screwed up, and they're way too early for whatever vision they have going on. So PlayStation 5 executives actually were questioned about Xbox moving away from consoles in an official Sony interview, and they had some interesting stuff to say. In a new Sony fireside chat featuring a bunch of PS5 related executives, the speculation of whether Xbox might be leaving the traditional console space was brought up. Specifically, Justin Hill, SVP of Finance and Investor Relations at Sony Corporation of America, was asked, "Many investors are speculating that Microsoft is moving away from the console. If that's true, is that good or bad for PlayStation?" The answer was delivered by Sony Interactive Entertainment President and CEO Hideki Nishino, who's the person you see on this in the image. I'm going to post this link to the article, and he advised that competition is a good thing for PlayStation, and it's not just Xbox that provides it, while also stating there's no urgent need to pivot on Sony's console strategy in his eyes. Here's what he said, and I quote, "So, we think that competition in the business is healthy and pushes us to innovate. There are multiple participants who together drive the overall gaming industry, and while there are new engagement models being explored, we ultimately think this is a good thing. However, as I mentioned earlier, we are confident on our current strategy. There isn't an urgent need for us to pivot, but we will continue to monitor play patterns appropriately as required." Now, this is interesting because, we've heard that Microsoft is working on the next Xbox console in some form, and it's expected to be a Series X successor arriving in 2027 or so. The speculation stems from a belief that it might be more PC-like than in the past, potentially supporting the likes of Steam in addition to current-day console games. The reality is we don't know enough about Xbox's current plans for the future right now, but clearly Sony doesn't see a need to pivot from the strategy that's proved successful with every PlayStation ever. So Xbox's next system might end up taking a different form as a result, but the signs suggest Microsoft not moving from a console entirely, although in my opinion, if you're doing something with PC, then you have effectively moved away from the console anyway. So like, that's really kind of an interesting way that they kind of put that to begin with. Like if you're putting out something that is going to be considered a PC or have PC stores, then you've already pivoted away from console, right? Because that's not a console. So, Sony is talking pretty much about what's going on. It's obviously, new gaming devices, new consoles, things like that. Last year, Sony delivered the PS5 Pro. Microsoft announced a PC handheld with the ROG Ally, and it sounds like the two teams aren't stopping there. As expected, next-gen Xbox and PlayStation plans are underway. In a business meeting, Hideki Nishino also touched on the PS6 a bit, and sorts of plans the company has for its next generation of gaming. The team is exploring new enhanced way for players to engage with PlayStation. He says, according to this, he says, while we cannot share further details at this stage, the future of PlayStation platform is top of mind. We're committed to exploring a new enhanced way for players to engage with our content and services. We're still exploring what the future of our platform would look like. So therefore, whilst we cannot provide any further guidance on operating income in future years, we've reduced traditional costs, as you describe it, by establishing a large ecosystem of players across both the PS5 and PS4. So it's true that the defined console generations are starting to kind of go by the wayside a little bit. But it is interesting that, Microsoft did cancel their next gen handheld plan that was going to be like able to play your actual libraries and things like that. Again, the PS6 I think is just going to be a traditional console. I still think that, in my opinion, the PS6 is going to have a disk drive, and I think that Microsoft's next offering isn't going to have that at all, and that's going to be, real unfortunate, because you've basically had people maybe buy 15, 16, 17 million Xbox Series X consoles this generation with a disk drive, and then you're gonna, go out there and, not be able to kind of sell them, and they might be buying physical games, and you're not going to give them the chance to play those via backwards compatibility. You know what I mean? I think that's really crappy to do. And I think that that's something that, everybody should be kind of upset about at the end of the day, and I think Sony isn't going to do anything like that to hamper millions of people, because believe it or not, millions of people are still buying, these things, via discs and things like that. Why would you try to limit yourself on what you were actually trying to sell people? Like, it doesn't make sense to limit anything, especially when there's millions of people out there that would still love the chance to kind of utilize physical media, you know what I mean? And Microsoft just doesn't seem to care about that. They're just all about kind of saving money or whatever the case may be, and that's okay with some people. Some people are okay with just being led around and going, okay, well, that's the future, derp derp derp, you know what I mean? And that's that's not me. I like doing things the way I want to do them, and if we just accept everything as, oh, well, that's the future of this, or that's the future of that, I mean, could you imagine if that's how everybody thought with these things? I think that would be pretty bad in terms of, what's going to happen or whatever, So like I said, Microsoft is, I think, going to be really hurting next generation, and I think the reason why they're going to be hurting is because they think that they're ahead on some kind of future-proofed idea by putting games everywhere and doing some kind of weird PC box or whatever. But at the end of the day, people that game on console are going to want that traditional experience. So I would expect that the PlayStation 6 is going to sell maybe more than the PS2, because people are just going to be jumping and flocking to it. I mean, I just can't see a world where the Xbox can exist anymore, especially if they're putting like PC stores and stuff on it. It just, to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that can exist at all, because that's not a console, that's just not. And people will probably realize that, and I'm sure some people will stick with Xbox because hey, it's that's where my library is or whatever. But who knows if you'll even be able to play your library, I mean, their idea of backwards compatibility is streaming. So, to to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that, but you guys might think differently, and I would love to hear your take on it. Like I said, I'll put this in the description, but which appeals to you guys more? A traditional console like PlayStation is going to be able to play PlayStation, Xbox, get more third-party games. I think whatever the next quote-unquote Xbox is just going to be more of a name-only type thing. So let me know what you guys think. Rack 'em up. Crap Gamer out.